Welcome to the Liberty Insider. This is the program that brings you news, views, discussion, insights, and information you need to know on religious liberty. My name is Lincoln Steed, editor of Liberty Magazine, and my guest on the program is Andy Im. You're a communications man from working with the Seventh Adventist Church in Michigan, and a youth leader with campus ministry.
That's right.
Let's talk about our world.
Yes, let's do it.
I originally am from Australia. Your forebears from Korea. Mm-hmm. You know, this is a world where people move to and fro, and we more and more see it as a single entity, don't we? Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't an unnatural thing recently when the Pope of Rome, itself a city far away, used to be the center of the world once upon a time, but not now. Mm-hmm. But the Pope of Rome came out with an encyclical on the environment. Mm-hmm. It made sense to a lot of people, don't you think? Because he spoke about something that's concerning to all of us. Mm-hmm. We're in a global village, mm-hmm. a little sphere in the middle of space, mm-hmm. And yet it just seems to be running down on us pretty quick. What the Bible says, the earth wears out like a garment, waxes old like a garment, doesn't it?
It does, yes.
And another text that impresses me, it says, God is coming to destroy those that destroy the earth. Mm-hmm. I don't think that would have been said if it wasn't as we see now that mankind literally is able to destroy the world. Mm-hmm. And beyond just degradation through bad habits, what if we have a nuclear war? Mm-hmm. You know, if what we've feared all of our lives mm-hmm. were to take place between Russia and the US and they shot off, let's just say 10% of their nuclear arsenal, we'll have nuclear winter here.
That's right.
The world would effectively be destroyed.
Yes. I do think that the environment, you know, it's a political hot topic, and so it's very,
there was no pun there, was it? Global warming?
No. I didn't mean it that way. But the Bible is very clear that, you know, we were created to be stewards of this earth. Right. And to dress it, to keep it, to maintain it.
That was Adam in the garden. It was his job to take care of it.
That's right. The original plan for this earth. And so I do think that protecting the environment is something that's biblical and that we as Christians should do our utmost in protecting and so forth. I'm also happy, for example, and I'm not endorsing any political party here, but you know, President Obama is expanding the national parks, and I'm one that appreciates the parks that we do have. I just got back from the Grand Canyon not too long ago, and what a beautiful, beautiful place, and certainly I appreciate it because it's God. Of course, that's a result of the flood and so forth, but at the same time, it's something so destructive. There's also a beauty there. You see the grandeur, the power of God.
It is huge
as well.
It's almost beyond imagining how big that
it is.
That gully, to use a little word, is through the.
It is.
Maybe it's something I should say. For me, the Grand Canyon has two moments. When we first came from Australia, my father bought a car and we drove across the U.S. from west to east. And we stopped at the Grand Canyon. Mm-hmm. It was in November at a motel. We knew it was quite close. We didn't realize till the next morning when we woke up and it had snowed the night before, the edge of the Grand Canyon was just behind our car. We were parked there. And there's a little fence like 18 inches high back then. And here it dropped away straight into the Grand Canyon.
Isn't that something?
But for me, the image that I'll never forget is before 9/11, flying in a United wide-bodied plane. It was a clear day, and, mm-hmm. and the president was actually visiting the Grand Canyon, and so the pilot told us about it and pointed out the lodge on the rim of the Grand Canyon where the president was, and he says, "We're a bit early. We'll take a tour around the Grand Canyon." And this plane just went on a big circuit around the Grand Canyon.
Wow.
Quite low.
Nice.
And it was a dream on that crystal clear day with the cars there with the president's entourage, the then president. I forget who it was, to be honest. Yes, something spectacular. A creation of God as part of the punishment, I guess, of the earth, but still a wonderful landmark that reminds us of the grandeur and the size of God's creation.
That's right.
But yet all of that is at risk, even the Grand Canyon.
That's right.
You can read some dire articles about the rates of erosion and the water changes because of dams and all the rest. And of course, there's plans for mining near the rim that could despoil it. So it's not inappropriate for people to have an environmental concern, is it?
No, absolutely not. And I think I took you a little bit off track, so I don't know, maybe.
Well, no, I'm heading for the Earth that's at threat, and efforts that have been made to save it, and in particular, in that vein, a document that the Pope of Rome issued last year in 2006. Early in 2016. I'm already thinking ahead.
Yes.
For 17. Laudato Si, it's called. They're always in Latin. But praise be to thee, I think it means literally. But he addresses this issue, and I have to commend him on one level. Wonderful. This is not inappropriate for people of faith to speak of things that concern the whole of humanity, the degradation of the earth. And he threw in some good practical advice as well as theological narrative. But you've read the document. What did you see?
I wouldn't say that I read.
Well, you looked at it.
The document.
What jumped out at you from that document?
Well, it's what struck out at me.
It's a long document for our viewers. You can get it online. It's about 120 pages by their paging system.
Yeah,
a little book-sized document.
I only read certain sections of it, and certainly he's making an attempt to unify the world.
It's directed to all peoples, not just
That's
Catholics,
right.
not just Christians, all peoples.
Yes, and I think you're going to have to refresh my memory a little bit because it was some months ago that I read that document.
Well, what caught my attention, because first of all, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. The Seventh-day Sabbath is vital to me. When you read the Bible literally and remember the history of God's dealings with the Jews, the Sabbath was central. And the Sabbath, as part of the Ten Commandments, there's just no textual reason for it to be changed. Even given to the Jews, it said, remember it. It wasn't, the Sabbath day is now a day I give to you.
Yeah.
It was the day that in the Genesis account, God sanctified it. They weren't Jews back in Adam and Eve were not Jews.
That's right.
So it's, even though it's been done, and even the Pope of Rome has done it recently, you say, well, it's a Jewish Sabbath. It's not really biblically true. It's just become true in these latter days where Christians, to differentiate, have gone to Sunday. And so in this document, the Pope seizes upon something very apt biblically. He said, this earth is wearing out. We're despoiling this earth. It may collapse on us. And he says, God, when he created man, understood that the earth needs to rest, animals need to rest, there's a rest cycle, and man needs to rest. And then he cites the seventh-day Sabbath as part of this rest cycle. And he applies it to the animals, to the earth. And several times in the text, and these maybe have been the sections that you saw, he comes back to this biblical injunction, the principle of rest, even the Jubilee rest, which is, of course, multiplying on the seven principle. And it's all wonderful. And as a Seventh-day Adventist, I thought, great, he's put it in there. He's picked up the model. The unfortunate thing is that then at the end, the Pope sort of morphs that logic of the seventh-day Old Testament, quote, Jewish Sabbath. He morphs and applies it to the Eucharistic Sunday. Well, you can do that as a figure of speech, but it's not really possible as a matter of theology. And then I think, to myself, this is not good, because here is a religious leader moving into a secular area, giving a solution. More than a solution, an imperative that without which we will all die. And he's saying we need to obey the principle of the seventh. But he applies it to Sunday. And in a previous document by his predecessor, I'm trying to think what it was called, that was given, that Benedict gave to actually President Obama in 2008. It was a document that addressed all the world's problems, and it said there's problems of economics and of capital and labor and of national autonomy and so on. And it said there that there is a need for a global authority with the power to act and to enforce. So I don't have to guess at where they're coming from. So here on the environment, when they lay it all out and it's fulfilled in us obeying the rest cycle that ends with Sunday, not the biblical Sabbath, that's bad on a religious liberty level. He can have whatever theology he likes. On this program, we can't restrict a Muslim, a Hindu, or variations of Christianity for their different doctrines. They have the right to be wrong, or I have the right to be wrong, depending on your viewpoint.
That's right.
But you don't have the right to force it on people. And this is the grand scheme to make it a matter of human survival to do what he says. So he doesn't need to say the next step, that if this is adopted and you don't go along with it, you're an enemy of mankind.
You know,
the stakes are very high.
What's very interesting is that the logic that is utilized are good values that the broad Christian community agrees with. You know, we do need a rest. Another thing that he's stating, the Pope, is how we need to move from a materialistic mentality that the American dream has caused us to focus too much on material wealth and that kind of thing, and we need to focus on the spiritual, and that's something that we as Christians.
Well, this was very good. He mostly majored in that in his speech that followed from the document, which picked up on the themes. But that's when he became very direct in his speech to Congress. That did flow out of what he said on the environment, but he didn't say that much on the materialism, or he at least didn't take direct swipes at capitalism and modern life in the document.
No, not in the document, but
in his speech into Congress, absolutely.
And he certainly, you know, and I believe we as Christians, you know, I preached a sermon not too long ago about the American dream. And we've kind of adopted that as a Christian goal or end for all of humanity, and especially us as Americans. But I really think that we need to think hard about some of these values that are espoused by our culture. And the Pope is rightly pointing out that we have become too materialistic, too, you know, driven by the accumulation of wealth, and that's the end in all of life. And those are not values that the Bible endorses, for example. And so he is utilizing Christian principles, using these things that we would all agree with for his own end.
We need to take a break on that. Very good point. We'll be back after a short break. Come back and we'll keep discussing this view of the environment and religious liberty implications. Stay with us.